I knew something was wrong the moment my real estate agent called me at 7 in the morning with panic in her voice. "Ryan, we have a major problem," Jennifer said, her usually calm demeanor completely shattered. "The title company just found a lien on your property. The buyers are threatening to walk." I sat up in bed, my heart racing. "What? That's impossible. I don't have any liens. I've paid everything on time, every single month since I bought this place." That's what I thought too, but according to the documents, the Meadowbrook Hills HOA filed a lien against your property 3 weeks ago for unpaid dues totaling $18,000. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. 18,000? Are you kidding me? My HOA dues are $200 a month, and I have automatic payments set up through my bank. There's no way I owe them anything, let alone 18 grand. Jennifer's sigh crackled through the phone. "I believe you, but we need to sort this out fast. The closing is scheduled for next Friday. If we can't clear this lien by then, the sale falls through, and you'll lose the buyers." I threw off my covers and started pacing my bedroom, my mind racing through possibilities. This house in Scottsdale, Arizona had been my home for 5 years, and I'd been meticulous about every payment. The sale was supposed to be smooth, easy money that would help me relocate to Colorado for my new job. Now, everything was falling apart. "Who do I need to call?" I asked. "Start with the HOA management company. Their number should be on your monthly statements. Get documentation of all your payments and demand to see proof of this supposed debt. I'll contact the title company and see if we can get an extension from the buyers." After we hung up, I immediately pulled up my bank statements on my laptop. Every single month for the past 5 years showed an automatic withdrawal of $200 to Meadowbrook Hills HOA. No missed payments, no return transactions, nothing. I printed out 3 years' worth of statements, which was as far back as my online banking went, and started making calls. The HOA management company, an outfit called Premier Community Management, didn't open until 9. I spent the next 2 hours getting increasingly anxious, drinking too much coffee, and checking every financial record I could find. Everything was in order on my end. At exactly 9 o'clock, I dialed Premier Community Management. A bored-sounding receptionist answered. "I need to speak to someone about my account immediately," I said. "There's a lien on my property that shouldn't exist." "What's your address?" I gave her my information and was put on hold for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes. Finally, a woman's voice came on the line, dripping with condescension. "This is Patricia Morrison, HOA Board President. I understand you're calling about your outstanding balance." The name alone should have warned me. Patricia Morrison had a reputation in our neighborhood as the ultimate busybody, the kind of person who measured your grass with a ruler and sent violation notices if it was a quarter inch too long. I'd had minimal dealings with her over the years, mainly because I kept my property in perfect condition and avoided neighborhood drama. "Mrs. Morrison, there is no outstanding balance," I said, keeping my voice level. "I've paid my dues automatically every single month for 5 years. I have bank statements proving it. According to our records, you haven't paid dues in 6 months. Additionally, you have accumulated fines for various violations that you've ignored. The total amount owed is $18,347.62. "What violations? I've never received any violation notices." "We sent them to your address. Not our problem if you chose to ignore them." "I didn't ignore them because I never received them. And what violations could possibly add up to that much money?" Her tone became even more superior. "Unauthorized exterior paint color, unapproved landscaping modifications, parking violations, and failure to respond to HOA communications. Each violation carries a fine of $500, with an additional $100 per day until corrected." I felt my blood pressure rising. My house is painted the exact same color it was when I bought it, which was pre-approved by the HOA. I haven't changed my landscaping at all, and I park in my own driveway. None of this makes any sense. Nevertheless, the lien is valid and legally filed. You'll need to pay the full amount before it can be released. I'm not paying $18,000 for violations that don't exist, and dues I've already paid. I want to see proof of these violations and proof that my payments weren't received. You can request copies of the violations for a fee of $50 per document. As for your payments, that's between you and your bank. Our records show no payments received. Then your records are wrong. I'm coming to your office today with my bank statements. We don't accept walk-ins. You'll need to make an appointment. Fine. When's the soonest appointment? Let me check. A pause. 3 weeks from today. 3 weeks? My house closes in 6 days. I need this resolved immediately. That's not my concern, Mr. Barrett. You should have paid your dues on time. Until this matter is resolved, the lien remains. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, absolutely stunned. This was insane. I called Jennifer back and explained the situation. She's stonewalling you, Jennifer said. This doesn't feel right, Ryan. Why would they suddenly claim you haven't paid in 6 months when you have proof of payment, and those violation fines sound excessive even for the pickiest HOA? What do I do? Get a lawyer. Today. I'll call the buyers and explain the situation, but I'm warning you, they're already nervous. They've been looking for a house for 8 months, and this is the 3rd sale that's hit problems for them. They might just walk rather than deal with more delays. I spent the next 3 hours calling attorneys. Most were booked solid or didn't handle HOA disputes. Finally, I found one who could see me that afternoon. His name was Richard Brennan, and his secretary said he had experience with HOA issues. Richard's office was in a modest building in downtown Scottsdale. He was maybe 50, with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to assess everything. I laid out the entire situation, showing him my bank statements and explaining the conversation with Patricia Morrison. He studied the documents carefully, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Did you receive any documentation about the lien before your real estate agent called? Nothing. The first I heard about any of this was this morning. That's interesting. Arizona law requires HOAs to provide notice before filing a lien. They have to send you a letter stating the amount owed and giving you a specific period to respond, usually 30 days. Did you receive anything like that? No. I would have remembered something that serious. Richard leaned back in his chair. I've dealt with Premier Community Management before. They manage about 40 HOAs in the Phoenix area. Most are fine, but I've seen some questionable practices. Patricia Morrison's name also rings a bell, but I can't place why yet. So what's our next step? First, we file a formal dispute of the lien. We'll demand proof of the debt and copies of all notices they claim to have sent. We'll also send them your bank statements showing the automatic payments. Second, we request a full accounting of your HOA account and copies of any alleged violations. If they try to charge you for those copies, we'll fight that too. Third, we notify the title company that the lien is being disputed and provide them with your payment documentation. Will that be enough to save the sale? It depends on the buyers and their attorney. If their lawyer is competent, they'll see this looks suspicious. That might actually work in your favor. How is that possible? Because if the buyer's attorney gets involved and finds evidence that this lien is fraudulent, it becomes a much bigger problem for the HOA than just a disputed debt. We're talking potential criminal charges for filing false documents. I felt a small surge of hope. You think the lien is fake? I think something's not adding up. Patricia Morrison knows you're selling your house, correct? I mean, I haven't told her personally, but there's been a for sale sign in my yard for 2 months. It's not exactly secret. Richard tapped his pen on the desk. Let me look into something. Give me until tomorrow morning. In the meantime, go through your mail from the past 6 months, every piece. See if there's anything from the HOA that you might have missed or discarded. I left his office feeling slightly better, but still anxious. The closing was in 6 days. Even if we could prove the lien was bogus, would we have enough time? At home, I went through my mail like an archaeologist on a dig. I kept important documents and bills in a file cabinet, but junk mail and random stuff ended up in a recycling bin in my garage that I emptied every few weeks. Unfortunately, the recycling had been picked up 2 days ago, so anything older than that was gone forever. I found nothing from the HOA except the standard monthly newsletters they sent out, the last one dated 2 months ago. No violation notices, no demands for payment, no warnings about a lien. Nothing. That evening, my phone rang. It was Jennifer. The buyers want to talk to you. Well, their attorney does. His name is Marcus Chen, and he's apparently pretty sharp. He asked if you'd be willing to meet tomorrow at 9 to discuss the situation. Of course. Where? His office in Tempe. I'll text you the address. Ryan, this could be good. If their lawyer thinks something's fishy, he might advocate for keeping the deal alive while we sort this out. The next morning, I drove to Tempe with a folder full of bank statements and Richard's business card. Marcus Chen's office was in a sleek modern building near Arizona State University. He was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with an easy smile that didn't quite hide the calculating intelligence in his eyes. "Mr. Barrett, thanks for coming in," he said, shaking my hand. "I've been looking into your HOA situation, and I have to say it raises some red flags." That's what my attorney thinks too. I pulled the lien filing from the county records. It was filed 3 weeks ago, which is interesting timing considering your house went under contract 4 weeks ago. I felt a cold sensation in my stomach. "You think they filed it because I'm selling?" That's exactly what I think. I've seen this tactic before, though not often. An HOA files a bogus lien to either force a homeowner to pay money they don't actually owe or to kill a sale as retaliation for something. Retaliation? For what? I've never had any problems with the HOA. I pay my dues. I keep my property nice. I don't cause trouble. Marcus opened a file on his desk. That might be the problem. I did some digging into Patricia Morrison. She's been HOA president for 8 years. During that time, there have been 3 lawsuits against the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, all settled out of court with confidentiality agreements. I can't get details on those cases, but I found something else interesting. In the past 5 years, 6 homes in your neighborhood have had sales fall through due to last-minute lien filings by the HOA. All 6 homeowners eventually paid settlements to the HOA to release the liens, then sold their properties months later. That sounds like a pattern. "It sounds like a scam," Marcus corrected. "Here's what I think is happening. Patricia Morrison and whoever else is in on it wait until a homeowner is under contract to sell. They file a lien for inflated amounts, knowing the homeowner is desperate to close and might just pay to make the problem go away. The homeowner pays, the lien is released, and the HOA pockets money they're not entitled to. It's fraud." "But why me? I've done everything right?" Marcus shrugged. "Maybe that's why. You're a perfect target. Clean record, no history of disputes, obvious motivation to pay because you're selling. They probably figured you'd write a check just to save the sale." "I'm not doing that." "Good. Neither are my clients. They're actually pretty angry about this. They've been trying to buy a house for months and they're tired of deals falling apart. When I explained what I found, they decided they want to help expose this if it's really fraud." "So they're not walking away?" "Not yet. I convinced them to give you 2 weeks. That's how long I think we'll need to prove this lien is fraudulent and get it removed. But Ryan, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there any possibility you actually owe this money? Any chance you missed payments or ignored notices?" "None. I have 5 years of bank statements showing automatic payments. I've never received a single violation notice. Until yesterday, I had no idea there was any problem." "Then we're going to bury them. I've already contacted your attorney, Richard Brennan. Good choice, by the way. He's got a solid reputation. We're coordinating our efforts. I'm filing a motion to have the lien declared invalid and removed. Richard is filing complaints with the state's Department of Real Estate and the Attorney General's office. We're also demanding a forensic accounting of the HOA's financial records. Can you do that?" "I can request it. Whether we get it depends on a judge, but the fact that we're asking will put pressure on them. HOAs that are operating legitimately have nothing to hide. If they fight the accounting, it makes them look guilty." I left Marcus's office feeling genuinely hopeful for the first time. These guys weren't messing around. They smelled blood in the water, and they were going after it. Richard called me that afternoon with more news. "I heard from Marcus. He's good, but I've got something else. Remember I said Patricia Morrison's name was familiar? I figured out why. She was involved in a mortgage fraud scheme about 15 years ago in California. She was never charged, but her husband went to prison. She moved to Arizona shortly after and apparently reinvented herself. So she has a history of financial crimes. Alleged history, but yes, it establishes a pattern. I'm also getting pushback from Premier Community Management. They're refusing to provide copies of the violation notices unless you pay their fee. I told them we'd subpoena the records if necessary, and suddenly they got more cooperative. They're sending copies tomorrow. What do you think we'll find?" Either the violations are completely fabricated or they're real, but the notices were never actually sent to you. Either way, it supports our case that the lien is fraudulent. The next day, Friday, the documents arrived at Richard's office. He called me to come look at them immediately. When I got there, he had papers spread across his conference table. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a violation notice dated 6 months earlier. "This claims you painted your house an unauthorized shade of blue, but according to the photo they attached, that's not even your house." I looked at the picture. He was right. The house in the photo was definitely in my neighborhood based on the style, but it wasn't mine. Mine was a tan stucco with brown trim and had been since I bought it. The house in the photo was light blue with white trim. "That's 447 Desert Sage Drive," I said, recognizing the house from my morning runs. "I live at 447 Desert Sage Way, different streets." Richard grinned. It wasn't a friendly expression. "They used the wrong address. Look at all these violations. Every single one lists 447 Desert Sage Drive, not Way." "So they meant to target someone else?" "Maybe, or maybe they just grabbed random addresses and got sloppy." "Look at the dates, though. All the violations are dated after you accepted the offer on your house. They backdated them to make it look like you'd been ignoring them for months." "How can you tell they're backdated?" "The metadata on the digital files. When I opened these PDFs, I checked the properties. They were all created last week. The dates on the documents say 6 months ago, but the files themselves are brand new. That's proof of fraud. Solid proof. Marcus is going to love this. We're filing an emergency motion on Monday to get the lien removed and to freeze the HOA's assets pending an investigation." That weekend was torture. I couldn't stop thinking about what would happen if this didn't work. If somehow Patricia Morrison and her accomplices managed to keep the lien in place, I'd lose the sale, lose my buyers, and probably have to pay tens of thousands in legal fees to fight this. On Monday morning, Richard and Marcus filed their motions. By Tuesday, we had a hearing scheduled for Thursday, 1 day before my original closing date. The judge assigned to the case was Maria Rodriguez, who apparently had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense in her courtroom. Wednesday afternoon, something unexpected happened. A woman knocked on my door. She was maybe 60, well-dressed, and looked nervous. "Are you Ryan Barrett?" she asked. "Yes. Can I help you?" "My name is Helen Lewis. I live over on Cactus Flower Court. I heard through the neighborhood that you're fighting the HOA over a lien." "That's right. The same thing happened to me 3 years ago. They filed a lien right before I was supposed to close on selling my house. I ended up paying $12,000 to make it go away because I couldn't afford to lose the sale. I've regretted it ever since." My heart started pounding. "Did Patricia Morrison threaten you?" "Not in so many words, but she made it clear that unless I paid, the lien would stay and my sale would fall through. She said the violation fines were legitimate and that I should have been more careful about following the rules. But Mr. Barrett, I never violated anything. I kept my property immaculate. Those violations were made up." "Why are you telling me this?" Helen's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Because I heard you're not backing down. I heard you have lawyers fighting this. If you can prove they did this to you, maybe I can get my money back. Maybe other people can too. I know at least 3 other homeowners who paid money to the HOA to release liens in the past few years. We all thought we were alone." "Would you be willing to testify about what happened to you?" "Yes. If it helps stop them from doing this to anyone else, absolutely." I called Richard immediately and put him on speakerphone so Helen could explain her situation. He took detailed notes and asked her to come to his office to give a formal statement. By the time she left my house an hour later, we had another piece of evidence that this was a systematic fraud scheme. Thursday morning arrived cold and clear. The hearing was at 10. Richard, Marcus, and I met outside the courthouse at 9:30. Both attorneys looked confident but serious. "Whatever happens in there, stay calm," Richard advised. "Don't react visibly to anything they say, no matter how outrageous. Let us handle it." We entered the courtroom to find Patricia Morrison already there with her own attorney, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit named Dennis Crawford. Patricia gave me a look of pure contempt when she saw me, like I was an insect who dared to fight back. Judge Rodriguez entered, and we all stood. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse and lie in existence and wasn't interested in hearing them again. This is case number CV2026004892, Barrett versus Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association, the clerk announced. Motion to remove lien and motion for sanctions. I've reviewed the filings from both sides, Judge Rodriguez said. Mr. Chen, you filed the motion to remove the lien. Please present your argument. Marcus stood and launched into a clear, concise explanation of the situation. He presented my bank statements showing 5 years of automatic HOA payments. He showed the violation notices with the wrong address. He explained the metadata proving the documents were backdated. He introduced Helen Lewis's statement about paying a similar bogus lien 3 years ago. He laid out evidence of 6 other sales that had fallen through due to last-minute lien filings. Your Honor, this is not a legitimate debt collection effort, Marcus concluded. This is systematic fraud, designed to extort money from homeowners at their most vulnerable moments. The lien should be removed immediately, and this matter should be referred to law enforcement for criminal investigation, Patricia Morrison whispered furiously to her attorney during the entire presentation. Crawford stood when Marcus finished. Your Honor, this is simply a dispute over interpretation of HOA rules and proper notice procedures. The lien was filed in accordance with Arizona law after Mr. Barrett failed to pay legitimate dues and fines. Any clerical errors in addresses are minor mistakes that don't invalidate the underlying debt. Minor mistakes? Judge Rodriguez's eyebrow went up. Counselor, every single violation notice lists the wrong address. How is that a minor mistake? The violations themselves are valid, Your Honor. The address error is unfortunate, but doesn't change the fact that Mr. Barrett's property was in violation of HOA covenants. Richard stood up. Your Honor, the photos attached to those violation notices show a completely different house. Not a similar house on a different street, but an entirely different property. Additionally, the metadata on those documents proves they were created last week, not 6 months ago as the dates indicate. This isn't a clerical error, it's deliberate fraud. Judge Rodriguez turned her attention to Patricia Morrison. Mrs. Morrison, you're the HOA president. Can you explain how violation notices for the wrong property ended up in your files? Patricia stood, her face flushed. Your Honor, we manage many properties. Mistakes happen, but Mr. Barrett definitely owes money. He hasn't paid his dues in months. Mr. Barrett has provided bank statements showing automatic payments every single month for 5 years. Do you have any evidence that those payments weren't received? Our records show no payments. Then your records are wrong or someone altered them. Which is it? Patricia's mouth opened and closed a few times. I don't know how to explain the discrepancy, Your Honor, but the lien was filed in good faith. Good faith? Judge Rodriguez's voice was sharp. Mrs. Morrison, I'm looking at evidence that 6 other homeowners in your HOA have had sales fall through due to last-minute liens in the past 5 years. All 6 eventually paid settlements to release those liens. That's a pattern. And I have a statement here from a homeowner who paid $12,000 3 years ago to release a lien that she claims was just as fraudulent as this one. Does that sound like good faith to you? Dennis Crawford jumped in. Your Honor, we're not prepared to address allegations about other cases today. This hearing is specifically about Mr. Barrett's lien. And I'm trying to determine if this lien is part of a larger pattern of fraud, Counselor. That's very relevant to my decision. She looked back at Patricia. Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to ask you directly, under oath. Did you file this lien knowing that Mr. Barrett did not actually owe the money claimed? Patricia's face went pale. Her attorney put a hand on her arm and whispered something urgently. She shook her head. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, Patricia said, her voice barely audible. The courtroom went silent. Even Crawford looked shocked. By invoking the Fifth Amendment, Patricia was essentially admitting that answering the question could incriminate her in a crime. Judge Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. Well, that's very telling. Mr. Crawford, does your client understand that invoking the Fifth Amendment in a civil case allows me to draw negative inferences? Your Honor, I need a moment to consult with my client. You have 30 seconds. Crawford and Patricia Morrison had a heated, whispered conversation. Her face went from pale to red to purple. Finally, Crawford stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Morrison wishes to withdraw her Fifth Amendment claim and answer your question. Too late. I've already drawn my inference. Mrs. Morrison refused to deny filing a fraudulent lien because doing so would expose her to criminal prosecution. That tells me everything I need to know. Judge Rodriguez pulled out a pen and started writing. The scratching sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet courtroom. The lien filed against Mr. Barrett's property is declared invalid and is hereby removed. The HOA is ordered to file the necessary paperwork with the county recorder's office within 24 hours to clear the title. Additionally, I'm ordering a full forensic audit of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA's financial records for the past 7 years to be conducted by an independent accounting firm. The HOA will bear the cost of this audit. Your Honor, Crawford protested, that's extremely prejudicial and costly. So is filing fake liens to extort money from homeowners. I'm also referring this matter to the Arizona Attorney General's office and to the Scottsdale Police Department for potential criminal charges. Mrs. Morrison, you and anyone else involved in filing this lien may want to consult with a criminal defense attorney. Patricia Morrison looked like she was about to pass out. Crawford was frantically taking notes. Furthermore, Judge Rodriguez continued, I'm granting Mr. Chen's motion for sanctions. The Meadowbrook Hills HOA is ordered to pay all of Mr. Barrett's legal fees and costs, as well as any costs incurred by the buyers due to the delayed closing. If Mr. Barrett's sale falls through as a result of this fraudulent lien, the HOA will be liable for any financial damages he suffers. Do you understand, Mrs. Morrison? Patricia nodded weakly. Out loud for the record, please. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. We're adjourned. As soon as the judge left, Marcus turned to me with a huge grin. That went even better than I hoped. Richard was equally pleased. The Fifth Amendment invocation was a gift. She basically confessed in open court. I was still processing everything. So, the lien is really gone? As of right now, yes, they have to file the paperwork, but if they don't, we'll have the sheriff enforce the court order. Your closing can proceed. Patricia Morrison hurried out of the courtroom without looking at anyone, her attorney trailing behind her trying to talk to her. I caught a glimpse of her face as she passed. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by fear. What happens now? I asked. Now? Richard said. Now the police get involved. Judge Rodriguez doesn't make referrals lightly. The AG's office will investigate, and if they find what we think they'll find, criminal charges will follow. Wire fraud, filing false documents, extortion, possibly racketeering if they can prove it was an ongoing scheme involving multiple people. We walked out of the courthouse into bright Arizona sunshine. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. My phone buzzed. It was Jennifer, my real estate agent. I heard. Marcus called me. Ryan, congratulations. We can close tomorrow as scheduled. The buyers are thrilled. They are? Are you kidding? Marcus told them they just helped take down a fraud scheme. They feel like heroes. Plus, they're getting a house they love. The closing the next day was almost anticlimactic after everything that had happened. The buyers, a young couple named Daniel and Amy, thanked me repeatedly for fighting the HOA instead of paying them off. If you just paid them, they would have kept doing this to other people, Amy said. You probably saved a lot of families from going through the same thing. Over the next few weeks, the investigation unfolded exactly as Richard predicted. The forensic audit found extensive evidence of financial irregularities in the HOA accounts. Patricia Morrison and 2 board members had been systematically filing fake liens, collecting settlements from desperate homeowners, and pocketing the money. Some of it went into the HOA accounts to cover budget shortfalls, but a lot of it disappeared into personal accounts. The scheme had been running for 6 years and had netted them over $300,000 from various homeowners. Helen Lewis had been one of 12 victims. The audit also uncovered that Patricia had been skimming money from legitimate HOA dues for years, which explained why the HOA budget was always tight, despite healthy collections. 2 months after my court hearing, Patricia Morrison, board member Derek Richardson, and board treasurer Sharon Wagner were arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, filing false documents, and theft. The charges carried potential prison sentences of up to 15 years each. I got a call from a detective working the case, asking me to provide a victim statement. I drove down to the Scottsdale Police Department and spent 2 hours going through everything that had happened. The detective, a patient woman named Susan Crawford, no relation to Patricia's attorney, took detailed notes. "You're probably going to be called as a witness when this goes to trial," she said. "Are you okay with that?" "Absolutely. I want to see them held accountable. You should know, we've identified 14 victims so far, and more are coming forward. Some of these people paid $20,000 or $30,000. A few lost their homes entirely because they couldn't afford the bogus liens and couldn't sell. This was systematic and cruel. Will the victims get their money back? We're working with the Attorney General's office on restitution. It won't be quick, but yes, we'll do everything we can to recover the money and return it to the victims." The case didn't go to trial. 6 months later, facing overwhelming evidence, all 3 defendants took plea deals. Patricia Morrison pleaded guilty to wire fraud, filing false documents, and theft. She was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to all victims. Derek Richardson got 5 years. Sharon Wagner, who cooperated more fully and showed genuine remorse, got 3 years and probation. Premier Community Management, the company that had enabled this by not properly overseeing the HOA's activities, was fined heavily and lost their license to manage HOAs in Arizona. Several other HOAs they managed underwent audits, finding similar but less severe problems. I got a check for $12,000 from the restitution fund, covering all my legal fees and costs related to the delayed closing. Helen Lewis got her $12,000 back. Other victims received various amounts based on what they'd paid. Not everyone got full restitution immediately, but the court ordered payment plans that would eventually make everyone whole. The Meadowbrook Hills HOA underwent a complete restructuring. The entire board was replaced through a special election, new management was brought in, and new safeguards were put in place to prevent similar abuses. Homeowners had to approve any liens by majority vote. Violation notices required photo evidence and independent verification, and all financial transactions over $500 needed dual approval. The local news covered the story extensively. I gave a couple of interviews, as did Helen Lewis and several other victims. The coverage led to investigations into HOAs across Arizona, with the state legislature eventually passing new laws requiring greater transparency and accountability for homeowner associations. About a year after everything started, I got an email from Marcus Chen. He'd moved to Colorado too, coincidentally, and was practicing law in Denver. He wanted to grab coffee and catch up. We met at a place near downtown Denver on a cold Saturday morning. "You know, your case changed my career," Marcus said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "I was doing mostly real estate transactions before that, pretty routine stuff. But after we took down Morrison and her crew, I started getting calls from people with HOA problems. I've represented 15 clients in the past year fighting abusive HOAs. We've won every case." "That's great," I said. "You're good at it. It's satisfying work. These HOAs have so much power over people's homes and lives, and some of them abuse that power terribly. Someone needs to push back." "Have you heard anything about Patricia Morrison recently?" "She's in federal prison in California. Earliest possible release is in 6 years. She'll be almost 70 by then. Derek Richardson is in Arizona State Prison. Sharon Wagner actually got out early for good behavior and cooperation. Last I heard, she moved to Oregon and works at a library. She apparently testified against some corrupt HOA board members up there who were running a similar scheme. At least she's trying to make amends. More than Patricia is doing. I heard through the legal grapevine that she's still claiming she did nothing wrong, that she was just enforcing HOA rules strictly. Delusional. We talked for another hour about our new lives in Colorado, the cases Marcus was working on, my new job at a tech company in Boulder. It was good to reconnect with someone who'd been through that stressful time with me. As I drove home that afternoon, I thought about how differently everything could have turned out. If I'd panicked and just paid the $18,000 to make the problem go away, Patricia Morrison would still be running her scam. More people would have been victimized. The fraud would have continued indefinitely. Instead, I'd fought back. Marcus and Richard had fought back. The buyers, Daniel and Amy, had fought back by not walking away from the sale. And because we all stood up to the bullying and fraud, we'd stopped something terrible and helped a lot of people. I'd moved on with my life. I had a great job, a nice apartment in Colorado with mountains visible from my window, and I was dating someone wonderful I'd met at work. The stress and anger from that experience had faded, replaced by satisfaction that justice had been served. But I never forgot the lesson I learned. Sometimes the only way to stop people who abuse their power is to stand up to them, even when it's scary and uncertain. Sometimes you have to fight, not because you're guaranteed to win, but because it's the right thing to do. And sometimes, when you fight back against fraud and corruption, you win bigger than you ever imagined possible. 6 months later, I got an invitation in the mail. The Meadowbrook Hills HOA was hosting a neighborhood appreciation event and wanted me to be the guest of honor. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to leave that whole chapter of my life behind. But curiosity won out, and I made the drive from Colorado back to Scottsdale on a warm spring weekend. The event was held in the community park, the same park where Patricia Morrison had once held court at neighborhood meetings, ruling over the HOA with an iron fist. Now, it was decorated with balloons and banners, filled with families and kids playing. The new HOA president, a friendly guy named Tom who'd moved into the neighborhood 2 years before all the drama, greeted me warmly. "Ryan, thanks so much for coming. We wanted you to see what's happened since everything changed." He walked me around, introducing me to neighbors I'd barely known when I lived there. Person after person thanked me for fighting the fake Lien, for exposing Patricia Morrison, for making the neighborhood a better place. Helen Lewis was there with her husband. She hugged me tight. "You gave me my courage back," she said. "I'd felt so defeated after paying that money, like I'd been such a fool. But you showed me I wasn't alone, that I wasn't crazy to think something was wrong. Thank you." Tom gave a short speech about the HOA's new direction, emphasizing transparency, fairness, and community over rigid rule enforcement. They'd relaxed many of the pettier regulations Patricia had insisted on. People could paint their houses any reasonable color without approval. Landscaping rules were simplified. The atmosphere was completely different. "We're actually a community now," Tom said, instead of people living in fear of violation notices. As the sun set over the Arizona desert and kids ran around eating ice cream, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. The house I'd owned here was now home to Daniel and Amy and their new baby. The neighborhood was healing from years of financial abuse and intimidation. Patricia Morrison was in prison where she belonged. I'd come to this place 5 years ago, just looking for a nice house in a good location. I'd left fighting fraud and corruption, helping to change laws and making a real difference in people's lives. It wasn't the story I'd expected my time in Scottsdale to tell, but it was one I was proud of. Driving back to Colorado that night, I thought about all the people who'd helped make justice possible. Richard Brennan, who'd recognized the fraud immediately and known exactly how to fight it. Marcus Chen, who'd convinced his clients to stand with me instead of walking away. Judge Rodriguez, who'd seen through Patricia's lies and acted decisively. Detective Crawford and the Attorney General's office, who'd investigated thoroughly and built an airtight case. Daniel and Amy, who'd been willing to delay their home purchase to help expose the truth. One person acting alone might not have been enough, but all of us together, each doing our part, had been unstoppable. I never thought I'd be grateful for Patricia Morrison filing that fake lien against my house, but in a strange way, I was. Not because I enjoyed the stress and fear and uncertainty, but because it gave me the chance to stand up for what was right, to help other people, and to learn that fighting back against injustice is always worth it, even when the odds seem impossible. The fake lien had been meant to trap me, to force me into paying money I didn't owe, to make me another victim in Patricia Morrison's long-running fraud scheme. Instead, it became the thread that, when pulled, unraveled the entire corrupt operation. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalyst for the best things we do. And sometimes, a fake lien meant to kill a house sale ends up killing a fraud scheme instead, exposing criminals and changing an entire community for the better. That's a trade I'd make any day. My phone buzzed with a text from my girlfriend, asking how the event had gone. I smiled and dictated a response while driving. Better than I expected. Tell you all about it when I get home. Home. It was funny how that word had shifted meaning. Scottsdale had been home for 5 years, but Colorado was home now. And somewhere in between, in courtrooms and lawyers' offices, and tense phone calls and moments of standing up to bullies, I'd found a different kind of home too. The knowledge that I could handle adversity, that I could fight back when wronged, that I had the strength to see justice through even when it was hard. Patricia Morrison had tried to cheat me out of $18,000 with a fake lien. Instead, she'd given me something much more valuable, absolute certainty in my own courage and integrity. The Arizona desert rolled past my windows as I drove north toward Colorado and the mountains and my new life. Behind me, Scottsdale and Meadowbrook Hills were fading into the distance. But the lessons I'd learned there would stay with me forever. Sometimes you don't choose your battles. Sometimes they choose you. And when they do, the only option is to fight with everything you have, trust in the truth, and believe that justice will eventually prevail. In my case, it had. The fake lien was gone. The criminals were in prison. The victims were being made whole. The community was healing. And I was free to move forward, stronger and wiser than before. As I crossed the state line into Colorado, I glanced in my rearview mirror one last time. Arizona was behind me now, literally and figuratively. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. Patricia Morrison and her fake lien had tested me and found out I was tougher than I looked. I hoped she was enjoying federal prison. She'd earned every single day of her 8-year sentence, and I'd earned my freedom from her schemes, my new life, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd helped stop a serial fraudster from hurting anyone else. The road ahead was dark, but my headlights were bright. I pressed down on the accelerator and headed home, leaving the drama and corruption and fake liens in the dust behind me where they belonged. It was over. I'd won. Justice had prevailed. And that was the best possible ending to the whole mess.